You can tell it's spring when Chester Creek can be heard through the trees. It has a gravitational pull that lures you down from the street to its rocky banks. All of a sudden you feel detached from society, nothing but you and the creek, slowly becoming one. As you walk along the path, you start to pick up on the creek's movements, faster down rock ledges and slower along the muddy flats. Pointing the way is a fallen tree. Its bark is rotting but serves well as a resting place. But it's too early to rest, so you keep walking, just you and the current. There are others here too, hopping from rock to rock. A couple quick steps, a bend at the knee, a powerful push, and then that moment seems to last forever, when one of the rock jumpers floats above the rushing current. Some walk the banks of a threatening river with careful steps, while others run along it with a dangerous but harmonious rhythm. But even a threatening current shows its beauty as it slides down the face of a rock, almost like a painting, smooth and detailed. It's a good place to stop and enjoy the elegance of nature. Eventually the current pulls you onward, downstream where more waterfalls await. The ground is soft and wetted from the melting snow and finally getting a chance to breathe after a numbing winter. And so are you, the nature walker, allowed the opportunity to breathe. A couple steps further and over a log, and the base of another waterfall opens itself to you. The majority of the current hugs the opposite bank, leaving only soft trickles hanging over the middle of the creek. Even nature knows the beauty of contrast. Continue walking and you will come across a concrete slab covered with rocks and moss. Sandwiched in the slab of concrete is a long drainage pipe. Inside it rests one of the last remaining chunks of ice. If you put your ear up to it, things sound different. A tossed pebble takes on a heavy echo and the rushing current sounds more like a whisper. This is the ultimate resting place. Dangle your legs over the side and watch the water roll by. It's almost mathematical the way the current wraps around the rocks and moves in unison downstream. For spring, the colors are awfully dull, earth tones with occasional bright green patches of moss. It's like the Bighorn River in Montana, where the only vibrant colors come from the trout that inhabit the stream. In Montana, if you rise before the sun, your chances at catching a trout are much greater. I remember slipping into my waders at 5 in the morning, jumping in the Suburban and driving to the river. Its current was cold and dark. Before your eyes got the chance to adjust, everything had to be done through other senses. You had to feel the neon fly fishing line between your fingers as you pulled it in, slowly but methodically, trying to match the movements of the rising nymph. You had to hear the current and where it wraps around the rocks, the places where trout might be hiding. You had to feel the rocks beneath your feet to gain steady footing, avoiding the moss-covered ones that are bound to make you slip. As for your fly, you simply had to know where it is. Feel its movements in the air as you work more line up from the spool. Hear it as it lands and wait for the nose of a trout to nib it from the surface. And if you're lucky, that trout will show its nose and you will see it, giving you the proper time to react and set the hook. But then things get tricky. Ambient light from the crowning sun starts to throw a glare over the river, and your eyes must adjust again. And by this point, if the trout is still hooked, it has probably taken a fair amount of line from your spool. But you can't tug back hard or you will lose him. So you just let him take your line because you know that he will tire before you. Slowly his movements become fatigued and you patiently pull more line from the guides, bringing him closer. You might ask yourself if it's a brown or a rainbow. Either would be fine, as long as it's not a colorless suckerfish. And in an unexpected last-ditch effort, the trout darts into the fast-moving water, trying to use it to his advantage. But you know what to do when you are not phased. Carefully but quickly you wade further into the water. This time it doesn't matter if you step on a mossy rock or not. Stakes are high. It could be over 20 inches long. You begin to feel like Brad Pitt and a river runs through it. If you had cigarettes in your shirt pocket, this would be the time to take them out and put them under your hat because you know you're getting wet. The sun is now well on its way and your hands, once white and colorless, begin to warm. Is it a brown or a rainbow, you ask yourself again. By this point you know it can't be a suckerfish. Only trout know how to lure a man into a rushing current. Voices from the shore can be heard. Other fishermen, probably just arriving. They're the ham and eggers, the one that spend the better part of their mornings making omelets and cups of coffee, arriving well after the hatch. But today at least they can witness the kind of fish that shows its nose before the sun rises, the one on the end of your line. Your forearm starts to tire from keeping constant pressure on the line. You think about changing hands, but it just wouldn't feel right. As the trout pulls you further into the current, you start to lose footing. Hopping from rock to rock, you feel like you're on the moon. The current lifts you and gradually sets you back down. 2 more steps and you'll be lost in the ether. Is it a brown or a rainbow, you ask yourself? It's a beautiful waltz. You push forward and he pushes back. He pushes forward and you step back. It's just a question of when the music will end and when the energy dies. You can feel their looks of curiosity on your back. The ones from the ham and eggers. A slight smile cracks across your dry lips. They're probably all pointing and asking the same question you're asking yourself. Is it a brown or a rainbow? Because they too seek the color in this dry and dusty place. At this point, size no longer is on your mind. You just want to see the fish responsible for dragging you out into the current and 200 yards downstream. You would even shake its hand if he had one. The sun is now full and round, bouncing above the horizon. Its warmth awakens the sage bushes lining the river. There is something spiritual about the way nature operates here. As you steal a glance at the horizon, you lose your footing and slip into the current. There is no turning back. You just have to ride it out until a shallow rock bar. You manage to keep your rod above the surface, but your waders fill up with water and weigh you down. You know you should have buckled them tighter, but it just wasn't comfortable. Your butt grazes the occasional rock and then really slams into others. You wince at the pain, but you keep your rod tipped high. About 50 yards ahead, the river widens and tapers out, which will allow you to catch your feet. In the meantime, you continue to be towed by the trout, keeping your legs downstream to protect your head from protruding rocks. Is it a brown or a rainbow? As you contemplate that question, your heels start to click against the bottom. Now is your chance. Like a water skier, you lean back and dig your heels into the gravel bottom. Slowly your feet take on a wake of rocks, and you come to a halt. The trout no longer has the advantage of a heavy current, and that smile finds its way back to your face. Like a little wisp of smoke, it curls up in excitement. Once again, you are able to pull your line through your fingers, bringing the trout closer and closer. You can see the ridge of his back as it enters the shallow water where you stand. You reach around to your back with your free hand and unclip your net, dipping it slowly into the ripple in front of you. Drawing back your arm, you drag the trout over the last 4 feet of water. It glides into the net, slender and beaming with color. The ham and eggers put a hand to their brow, trying to block the sun to see your catch, but you keep your body between them and the fish, because only those who wake before the sun get the privilege of knowing the kind of fish that noses the surface in the dark, the one that shows its color when the world seems dull.